Hi, everyone. My name's Stu. This is Philip.
Hey guys.
So every Friday, we basically chat about various random AI related things in our office, and we thought it'd be a good idea to just record it now and see what comes out. So Philip has obviously got a lot of experience in the data space, and I'm a UI UX developer, designer, and yeah, we thought we'd just talk about what's currently trending right now in the AI space and come up with a topic. And I think today we've kind of got a feel about the jobs thing being quite a hot topic right now, AI replacing jobs. So I don't know. We were just chatting about it just now, and we thought we'd just kick things off. You had a thought, didn't you, Philip? About
I mean, for a first time in front of the camera, you can tell we're still trying to get our offices arranged up to look good. But, I think a lot of the fear around AI, you know, the closer you are to it, the more realistic assessor you are of its capabilities. You read about, what the industry leaders are talking about its capabilities at in terms of what it can replace in the workforce. And they're obviously coming at it from a perspective of leaning sort of as far as they can feel like they can justify in terms of what it can do. Because they want to see the technology out there. They want to see you using your products. They want to see you spending money at their companies. So the closer and closer you get to the technologies and actually using them to try to accomplish work, the more of a realistic assessment you have of its capabilities. And so I think if you ask a population of people who are selling AI stuff and then a population of people who are doing AI stuff, they will have a different list of jobs that that are sort of eligible.
have you seen in your experience where are you seeing like roles being immediately affected right now in your experience?
I mean, the closer you are to what the early image models were doing of sort of just I've got an idea and I need to see a visualization about that idea, but I don't have a super strong opinion about the quality of that. Think like stock photography, you know, I'm doing a post and picking a header image for it. Like it's got to be decent, but it's not like you're competing on the quality of that. Anybody who specialized in like that level of stuff was, I mean, past tense, like wiped out immediately because there was just no need at that point to sort of employ somebody. And it moves up the value chain from that. So in the data space, very, very basic junior data engineers, ETL developers. Obviously, there's still a lot of them because AI is coming along, but firmly in the crosshairs, right? Going in and saying there's data in this system, there's data in that system, here's the credentials, copy it from one to another. You needed an engineer to do that, and that wasn't work that senior engineers wanted to do. And so that's why you had junior engineers as a work they did. But now it's trivial. It takes no more than a couple of keystrokes, and it's doing that kind of connection
It's
for
funny
me.
because like every day I kind of when I go into a place I'm like, is that job going to get replaced by AI? Is that job going to get replaced by AI? And I'm constantly thinking that all the time. Like, how is that going to be affected by AI? And this week actually there was a lot of talk about Claude Code, and I mean I feel like Claude Code's been out for quite a while now, but all of a sudden now it is now the thing. Well, this week it has been the thing, but anyway, yeah, there's been a lot of talk on social media about it, and how it's their latest version of it, or maybe it was Codex. I can't remember. It actually has access to your folders in your computer, and therefore it can access pretty much anything in your computer, like your documents, your emails, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of brought a new level of autonomy to tasks that we perform, right? And that got me thinking about virtual assistants, because you also brought up the fact that you were looking for a virtual assistant. My experience in the last decade or so of doing startups, I've used virtual assistants. I hired people in the Philippines. Obviously their role is to go through your emails, write replies, or maybe filter through some of the junk, and all sorts of different things. Write me something, write me a summary on all this kind of stuff, which, as you know now, AI can do. So essentially with Claude Code going into your computer and your mailboxes and being able to do all that stuff for you, that job right there is now in question. I know you said actually I want them to do more human level type things, but I mean that's a good example of a job that's maybe in question.
Yeah, it's interesting reason to look at like the fear associated with automating that kind of work. Because if you think about the risk vector for like what's going to happen if um, something's happening that you didn't want to happen, right? So like with a virtual assistant who's in the Philippines, there's communication issues, there's timing. You have to make sure that their integrity is high and they're not going to misuse your credentials and things like that. But like you don't generally have to worry about them wiping your hard drive out. But that is a very real concern with an AI tool trying to manage your email for you is it could decide that's the quickest path to solving the problem and you wouldn't even have a chance to do it. There's something I've seen a term for it, but it's like a paradox where the things that people want to use the AI to do are also the things that are the riskiest to allow an AI to do in general. And when it comes to personal assist, a good example because um, if you, uh, I'll fill in the terms or put it across the bottom of the screen or something here, but like there's a triad of like of death or something, they call it like that. And it's like if it can read sensitive information, if it can access the internet, and if there's a way to inject code into it, you're dead. Like just assume that it's breached. But that's literally what you're trying to do when you say, I want to send email for me. You got all those things wrapped up. And if you take one of those things away, it doesn't have access to information. It doesn't have the ability to access the internet. It doesn't have the ability to get anything injected into it. And it just doesn't have any value then. It's not helping that.
It's amazing how much we do trust the cloud, the AI. You know, it was always a big thing, wasn't it, when cloud SaaS software as a service caps came out, and cloud, like what are you putting into the cloud? Now people do it without even thinking. Just going to throw in all your details, your screenshotting, very personal things, and just throwing it out to the AI and hoping it's going to solve your life, and it probably does. But then you don't realize the broader impact of what it could be doing right there. And we just trust Sam Altman with all our data.
Well, we trust them also in the way of we don't necessarily trust that we're going to get in trouble if something happens because there's like an IBM effect, right? It's like when you were going into the cloud for the first time and something went wrong, it's because you didn't understand the risks of going into the cloud, right? Now you go into the cloud and something goes wrong, and it's like, well, of course, Amazon defaults your buckets to public access. Like everybody knows that. So if you make that mistake, it's like, well, yeah, everybody. So it kind of like makes it a little easier to play that game. Um, but just in terms of like, if I was a security person right now, I'd be terrified because we used to talk about the fact that when you were developing and you'd add a package and it would sort of just pull the package in, and you wouldn't necessarily know that you pulled something in, and so therefore you were um, like aware, but in an indirect way that you probably should check whether there was something in that package. And you see the supply chain attacks over and over again as like the new vector. But with the coding assisted tools, it's just all stuff all day long. You have no idea. You don't even know what happened. So you don't even know that there was anything happening that you should have been concerned about, which is a completely different risk profile. But you're sort of aware.
So obviously lots of jobs are definitely being in question. Like we talked about VAs and there's various other jobs that are definitely being questioned by AI right now. Let's talk specifically about software engineering, because I know this week it's been, all I've seen this week is talk about software engineering. And I saw a post this morning about someone saying how they're genuinely really upset that they've invested years and years of years, learning, studying how to be a great software engineer. And now they're watching code being written in seconds, what they would have taken them days. And this is obviously something we know to be true, but the emotional level is now being seen in these posts and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. This really is hitting hard now. So in regards to like actual software engineering, what's your take on someone who's right now freaking out about their job?
I mean, the classic move is just to be the guy implementing the AI, and then you won't be displaced by the AI. I mean, you you can certainly put yourselves into positions where you're insulated from it. I went through this process when I was at the Adecco Group, and we built a kind of career helper tool where you would tell it what you were working on, and then it would give you a sense of like, well, based on what you're doing, and these are the characteristics of it that seem to line up with what we believe about the automation risk, and therefore here's how you should tweak your career in a way that'll sort of insulate you from that. And so, like example, is pre LLM, so I don't know how relevant this is, but if you were just a data entry person before, it would say, "Hey, become a medical transcriptionist." Why? Because medical transcription is much, much, much higher on accuracy, and perfect first flight accuracy is one of the big risk factors for LLMs. They're a little more probabilistic than that. So you're sort of leaning into the parts of it that are a little more resilient, even though if you look at the sort of broader level labor market studies, that's still data entry. Like medical transcription still counts as data entry. So you can't just take data entry and say that whole thing's going away. It's really about finding like a defensible position in there, or just joining the dark side and being part of the problem if you see that as the problem.
I mean, I've been putting a lot of stuff out this week about like how AI is amplifying your skills. It's not replacing them. And I think like with user experience and user experience design, like we've always AI, it's not taking away what we already did before. We're designing these experiences because we're humans and we're able to empathize. As designers, we should be able to emphasize what the user, the client wants, be able to sort of picture that in our minds and then implement that. And AI can obviously read a requirements document, everything like that, but it can't quite, it's still not human. Say still not human. And it can't really imagine in its brain what as well as we can in terms of what the client wants. And therefore we're still going to be doing a really good job, hopefully, of designing user experiences better than the AI would.
Yeah, I mean, I especially think it draws a line when the skill set is varies in quality, right? If you're a really good designer, you'll be fine. Now, do people know enough about what a good designer and a not as good designer are like to be able to make a purchasing decision that way? That's kind of a different question, right? But AIs can't provide better quality output than we can. They can do it faster and they can do it cheaper at a lower quality bar, and the quality is getting higher and higher, right? But they're built from us, they're trained from us, so they can't be better than us at the artifact itself. And it's hard to tell with code whether code is good or bad, and so it's much more subjective. But from an art quality standpoint, like you could look at a well-designed website and say that's a real well-designed website. And I can sit here now without any sort of context and even thinking into the future and say an AI is never going to be able to design a website as good as you can because you are good, and it just can't get there. The best it can do is learn from you and try to imitate you. But you're what trains it, not the other way around. That's always that basic function is always going
So
to
how do you think that relates to back to the software engineering role, that senior software engineer, who wrote? I wrote a piece today, and got some people got a little bit wound up about it because they were saying that it wasn't. I'm saying, well, it's about the code. In a job interview a few years ago was about the code, like what can you code, how do you code, blah blah blah. And someone was saying, well, it's not about the code. It was never about the code. Like essentially agreeing with me that it's about the output. And as a senior engineer, you are doing amazing code, but what is it that an AI can do coding now? So what is it that the software engineer can do that the AI can't do? We've kind of answered that with user experience just now, I think, roughly. But with software engineering, a senior software engineer, what is that thing that AI can't replace right now?
I mean, the farther you can get from the code as your sort of primary value you're bringing, the little more insulated you're going to be. So somebody who understands the business really well and is also responsible for the code is going to be more insulated than somebody that just writes code because AIs can just write code, but they can't go out there and talk to your business users. They can't sit in a focus group and sort of watch people interact with things, right? Like there has to be a level that you bring to it that provides it in a way that AI can't do. And if your job previously was just to do the one thing that AI can do, then you kind of have to branch it. Like you have to do it intentionally. One way to do it is to get more senior, but you can't really like do that on command. But you can probably try to push a role out and say, I'm not just going to be code. I'm also going to talk to the users ahead of time because I want to understand their problems at a deeper level before I design something. You do that as part of the
I think
UX
that would scare a
process.
lot of software engineers to be talking to the
Probably,
client.
probably. But I think that, they're already scared. We wouldn't be having this conversation if there wasn't a general sense of fear. It's just really amorphous right now as to exactly what's going to happen. And especially that the difference between, what out of everybody that loses their job over the next 5 years, including anybody, right? Some portion of them shouldn't have, in the sense that like someone thought AI would be better than it ended up being and made that reduction in anticipation of that, and it didn't pay off. Somebody's gonna be in that position, right? So you just don't know whether it's gonna be you, and you can't rely on the fact that just sit here and say, I'm safe because AI can't do my job, because you could be one of the ones that gets it accidentally meaning like unintentional consequence, that kind of thing. So you have to be thinking proactively, not just about I feel like I'm safe, but how am I continuously thinking about the impact of that? But this is no different than automation. I feel like we're not applying as many tools as we have developed over the course of just general process automation in companies. This has been done for scientific management in the 70s, right? Take a process, try to automate parts of it, try to operationalize it, split it up, uh, verticalize part. Like there's strategies here to do it, and AI is no different. It's just a different scale of automation and in a different area. It's more automation and information and not an assembly line, but the economic function of how it works in the enterprise and productivity is more or less the
Yeah.
same.
It's like if you ask an AI to build a dashboard, it always you'll probably find it always looks the same. It always looks the same. I mean, obviously it uses the same frameworks like ShadCN and all that. We know that there's
Yeah,
limited good CSS and visual frameworks out there, but regardless of that, it always laser things out the same. You have the widgets at the top, and then the chart, and then it's always the same layout. And in a project I was working on this week, it was interesting to sort of say, "Hey, build me a dashboard." And he goes, "Okay." It's already thinking, "I know how I need to what this dashboard's going to look like." And you say, "I want it to have multiple views. I want it to have these different dimensions of data that I want to use to plot, and I want to have comparison charts." And you kind of get a bit more complicated, and the user experience is maybe a little more different to what is typical for a dashboard. And the AI goes, "Okay, sure, I know what you want. I'll build it." And it goes ahead and builds it. And it's interesting how you can see how it really did try to meet your requirements, but also it just did the way it's trained to build a
so
dashboard.
that's the thing.
And then you're like, no, 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 that's not what I wanted in my mind. So you've almost got this whole new paradigm or way of thinking that you're teaching it. It's like, no, this is actually what I wanted it to build, and then it's learning essentially from that new way of thinking when it comes to dashboards. And that took a lot of prompting and iterations to get it to be what I wanted it to be. But I think that's just a good example of how, like you say, it's almost like there's still going to be some kind of mold that you
Yeah,
apply to things, and the AI is going to still be within that mold a lot of the time.
yeah, yeah. Dashboards are a great example. I mean, you know, half a decade ago, we were talking about usability of dashboards and sort of the quality of them from an experience standpoint. But even the ability to like recognize that when you tell an AI to build a dashboard, right? It's going to think about every dashboard it's seen in its training data. Always a heuristic you can use, like how common is this in training data? The more common it is, the more it's going to drive it out. And most dashboards in its training data are going to be really simple. There's a list of entities, put it over a time series, pick one or two dimensions to sort of split it by and have different lines for each of those time series. And it's just going to do that over and over again. And you'll see that screen. You saw it earlier when we were looking at the mock-up, right? It was like it just one tab per thing and then that thing over time and then split by these things. So it's always going to approach it that way. So the further what you're actually trying to get out of it than just that, the less valuable that's going to be for you. And the more you're going to need somebody to come in later and say, oh, sure, but now you got to actually do this stuff, that extra stuff. The only way you know that is because you're the domain expert, because you're the ones using it every day. You go back to like, because you're the person talking to the business, you're asking what they actually make decisions on.
See, like you say, it's almost like the roles that we're talking about getting replaced are just they're getting kind of growing new legs of like being able to, like you said, learning what the client requirements are. It's like a
Yeah.
whole new leg that you need to grow. Like, yeah, sure, you can code. The AI can code now. That's not a thing. But do you understand the requirements the client's giving you? Is there, how can you take what the LLM's done and actually really understand what the client wants and shift it into what they want?
Yeah. I'd imagine you look back across like really specialized careers that were just doing one thing, right? Uh, there was I think it's called a furrier. There's somebody who put shoes on horses, right? That's all they did. They put shoes on horses, and generations of people that were growing up doing that, making hammering the metal, putting the pins together, putting the shoes on. That's all they did. Fast forward, and there's lots of faster ways to do that. Way fewer people are going to be focused just on that. They'll do that, but they'll do other things besides that because those other things where their insulation from just being, I'm going to say typecast, but just being sort of stuck in that one vertical that's kind of going away. Every time you see a primary occupation start to be at risk like that, you'd expect them to then expand out to very similar things on the outside of that to scope them in to try to defend themselves. So software engineering is no different. It's just what's on the outside of software engineering. It's infrastructure, databases, the user experience part. There's being close to customers, interviews. You just got to find something.
Here's a question for you. What do you think about the term or the role prompt engineering? prompt engineer. Like, was that just something that popped up for a couple of years, during this when the AI phase started, or is that really still a thing, a prompt engineer? Is that just not what we're all doing now is prompt engineering?
Yeah, I mean, you very much all are doing prompt, and even if you're not consciously going through the process of improving the prompts, you are subconsciously doing it because you had a bad experience and now you say it a different way. And I have my prompting style and you have your prompt style because it's been evolved that way. The idea that an occupation, though, I think is really interesting because that's probably a classic example of like one very specific thing that was so specialized for a certain period of time that you could just do that, right? And then eventually, for whatever reason, it stops being enough to just do that, and you kind of have to branch out. So your prompt engineers became AI engineer, your AI engineers became applied engineers. It's like a cycle. It kind of feels like that with prompt engineering. Now, what they were doing though is absolutely still a thing, and still big opportunities, iterating on prompts to try to improve them. And you still need humans involved to sort of generate the raw materials to do that. But you have frameworks now like DSPY and things like that that'll just sort of take a prompt and run with it and then come back and be like, okay, look, if we just sat here and iterated over this thing for a year, this is the best we could come up with. And it's just going to give you that. So is that automating prompt engineering? Very much so. But the same reaction then. They focus on the high value prompts. They do other things other than prompts. It's a pattern. It's a
I
playbook.
feel like even 6 months ago, it changed. The prompting thing was so important, like a year ago. Like, you've got to get the right prompt. You are a virtual assistant. You're doing this, this, and this, and this. Your name is so and so. Be
Yeah.
very specific. And I think, like, over the last, for me, I've just stopped being clever about my prompts. I've just kind of just been, especially with later models like Opus 4.5. I just feel like it knows what I want. And I have been doing really lengthy prompts, and it's been getting it right. So obviously the models are getting more intelligent, but again, talking about prompt engineering, like, again, people used to spend a lot of time writing these prompts, whereas now I don't think that's needed so much.
I know. I think you're right, and I think when you said it's not training on what I'm doing, it kind of is though, because you're in one of the spaces, and I'm in one of the spaces where that is a lot of the training data, like that's being generated is people solving coding problems, people building websites, people assessing the quality of a data analysis, something like that. Like that is what it's being trained on. That's what they're out there gathering from Scale AI and
And
sort of.
I guess, well, with what I'm doing, I'm often working within Cursor, and Cursor has a context. Even though each conversation has its own context, you almost exist within the wider context of the application you're working on, which has README files, and it has like a bunch of information. It has obviously the code structure. So when you say, "Hey, I want to add, a sign up form or something," it will be able to say, "Oh, I can see your database structure. I know what this project is about because I read the README file. I know the last thing you were working on because you had this like bugs report." So it can almost has that context already. So it makes it easy for me to say, "Hey, build me a sign up form." And in the GPT world, ChatGPT, we're using it, and we have our subscriptions, and we have memories, right? We're probably saving memories, and it's learning about us, very top level things. So when we say, "Hey, can you write me a report of the recipes that I did this month or whatever, and give me the best ones," it's going to know which ones you liked. It's going to know your tastes because it's learned over the time. So you can just do one quick prompt and get what you want because of context. Um,
Because of context and because of the harnesses. So you talked about sort of the software being there that can organize the files and give it the ability to access things. But also just because you're not the first person to ask that. And if they've, even having all that information available in the editor, the Cursor team still has to go through and fine tune their models on, if not their literal models, then the prompts and the harnesses and the system prompts and things for that environment. And so the more people use it for a particular purpose, the better it's going to get at that thing if they're using it in that feedback loop way. And so the more sophisticated the models get, especially in the direction you're in, the less prompting you're gonna have to do because it's just smarter. Like it just knows what you mean with less information, the more it's been trained.
Because I was kind of the reason I was getting to this was I was kind of answering my own question because we're talking about different legs coming from these different roles. Like, one of the legs would have been prompt engineering leg. Say, for example, like our office manager here, that's her job, to manage the office, make sure the snack machine's filled up. But like, if she's dealing with clients, customers, and things like that, she can have an AI leg to her role, which is like being able to leverage AI in her role. And part of that would be prompt engineering. But really, That's what I'm saying. Everyone is now having that leg to their jobs because everyone is expected to work with AI in their jobs. It's just an expectation now that you leverage AI. So it's not really like a cool thing that you can add to your resume. It's like, oh, I work with AI because everyone works with AI. So prompt engineering isn't a role, and not neither is the fact that you can work with AI a benefit to your role.
No, no. I mean, take an example. An office manager at a shared working facility. Generally, you're doing a lot of probably outbound marketing, giving tours, things like that. So let's say you felt like there was a risk for you being automated because outbound marketing was suddenly AIable, right? And so your boss came and said, "Oh, this outbound marketing thing's pretty good. I don't know that we're going to need you to do that anymore." And you might think, "Oh my gosh, that's a lot of my job. Am I at risk here?" You might go and say, "Hey, we have like a handyman that comes and does basic maintenance around the place. Maybe I'm going to take some of that up, or maybe I'm going to be uh, playing the role that of like the vending machine maintenance and things like that. Like finding ways to kind of expand it to not need other resources, but by making your role bigger, it makes it then harder to look at that and say, well, because AI can do that part of your role, it doesn't make sense to have a whole role here. And then you're either part time or find a different role at that point. So you can proactively address your scope, but it has to be proactive. No one is going to do it for you.
With your experience in the staffing, recruiting area, how have you seen AI affecting the change or shift in job roles over the last year or so, 6 months?
You've seen a big uptick in it being used for communications, especially text-based communications. That's obviously where it's really strong. Um, Feedback that I've gotten from people, from clients and people in the space that are really trying to apply AI is that it seems to do well at scheduling. It seems to do well at like qualifying, like, hey, you got to ask these 3 questions. It doesn't really matter what the answer is, and there's not like a conversation happening. It's really just like, this is our 3 screener questions. Can an AI make that call? I think you see a tremendous amount of interest in that. When you talk about being able to do natural language analytics against transcripts of calls and really understanding like the conversations that are happening, I think that's really designed to upskill everyone based on sort of passive observance of best practices in those kind of environments. So there's a lot of interest in that. Um, and anything that really revolves around the idea that you're processing language rather than building relationships, or just doing administrative things. I think that's really where like you see the most activity. And honestly, it's probably where most of the demand is from because recruiters, like most sort of expert based occupations, is the relationships that they build, the in person touch. That's really where their value is. And they know that. And the administrative stuff that they do because you have to do that stuff to do the in person high touch stuff. So if you come to them and say, "Hey, I'm going to take these administrative tasks away and give you more time to do high touch," then obviously they're going to be incredibly excited. You just have to often like authentically follow through on that and not make that just sort of the moniker, like the story, when actually it's about having fewer recruiters. And that's very much a choice that the company itself makes. There's nothing endemic about the technology that pushes it in one way or the other. It's just how you choose to deploy it. And I think I've seen everything. I've seen the whole gamut. I've seen people come out of the gate and say, "This is just about cost cutting." People come out of the gate and say, "I'm trying to free up money to spend on outbound sales so I can drive volume higher." Bigger the company, more likely they're trying to cost cut than the other, but you see on both sides. Because I think people don't know yet, and there's just a lot of experimentation.
It's interesting what you said earlier about automation. I just think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because like you said back in the 70s, but I mean, think about it, like even 100 years ago when, farming tools were coming out and replacing people and
Yeah.
automation was happening in that area too. But jobs they just moved, right? They disappeared, but then new ones came up, right? So I think that's probably the positive angle to all of this is that your job just may be shifting into a new direction or changing shape somewhat. So I think I think this whole time right now it is scary, but it's also kind of like we don't need to be too afraid because I think that we just what we need to definitely do is keep we need to be staying in this space and reading everything we can every day about like what's happening and understanding AI, understanding when models come out and what they do and how they work with each other, right? And the different LLMs and everything. So like being aware of what's happening is probably the most important thing right now in your job, and keeping talking about it, because it's ultimately we're gonna be all right.
Yeah,
AI is gonna
yeah,
help us. We just have to figure out how that's gonna happen.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to navigate the when a tool can do positive things and negative things, and ethically, morally, you have your own opinion about what either one of those things are, right? And you want to see it used for the things that you think are good. But in developing it, you enable both sides. And that's a real, I think, challenge that anybody that pushes in this kind of productivity direction goes, is because both they're mirror images of the same force. Do more with less. So therefore, do you need fewer people, or is there more to do? And that'll always be true through every version of this technology. And if you're not at least thinking through how that basic kind of force affects your role as a microcosm, both within your company, but then also like amongst other people who are your peers who do the same thing you do, then you're just waiting for it to happen to you, right? And there's nothing that you can do.
I think there's also a lot of scare tactics out there right now, and I think there's a lot of people that are kind of fear mongering and scaring people with the stuff that they're saying. I think my advice would be just don't just take all that with a pinch of salt, because a lot of that stuff isn't even true. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I just cloned YouTube with one prompt." A lot of it's just trying to get people's attention. It isn't actually really happening. And especially, I was reading another post about how someone was saying, they built this whole thing with Claude Code, and um, the LLM was saying, I double checked it, I triple checked it. There's no bugs. It's error free. It's working. And then when the senior software engineer came in and checked it all, it was actually bug ridden. It wasn't the tests it had written weren't very good tests, and actually, it hadn't written the right tests and all this kind of stuff. Was we believe the LLM when it says, oh yeah, it's working, it's great. And we've seen that with ChatGPT when we ask it it's a question. It's like, oh no, I'm 100% sure about this. You're like, well, you're just saying that because you want to make me happy or whatever. But um, so yeah, just don't always believe the hype. Don't believe all that stuff, because you are still needed. You are. Believe in yourself, believe in your skills. Go and check that code base. Go and check those tests and see if it really is true that it's you know
Yeah.
bug free, because you'll check it and you'll probably find that it's not. And so believe in yourself. The AI isn't, it says it's right, but it's not absolutely right all the time.
Right about the noise being
Yeah.
thing factor to how people are supposed to react. I think the easiest way to think about it is whatever you hear is wrong. It's not wrong in the sense that like there's no truth to it. It's wrong in the sense that our media environment, which is how we consume things, skews towards extreme positions. So it's neither one of what you're hearing. It's in the middle of it, right? And that's where you really find the value is between the 2 points. And if you're just predisposed to pull yourself toward either end of the spectrum, you're not going to be in the middle. You're going to be on the fear side. And statistically, fear sells better than hope, engages better, produces better results. So it's going to skew fear. So if you just look at the media environment and you say there's a lot of extreme positions and there's more on the negative side, that's a just there's nothing that reflects about technology for that, right? You want a real if you want the purest example of what the real capabilities are, go to an off-brand conference where people from normal companies use it as like their part of their benefit package. They get to go to these conferences, a vendor conference or something like that, right? And they go and they speak, and all they're there to do is to get the free trip to Vegas and gamble for a while. But in order to go, they had to put this presentation together, and so they described some AI project they did and the results. And they go up there and they talk for 20 minutes and they get off the stage. That is the most honest version of AI that you'll see. Because that guy has no incentive to sell you anything, right? He's gotten everything he wants by being there. So everything he shows you is the God's honest truth about how effective AI was. And if you go to talk to that guy, you'll see a very measured depiction of it. It'll be like, it seemed to be good when we demoed it, but the further we went into it, it became a struggle. And so we ended up using it for less than we really thought, but we're still better off with it. And so we were good, just in loop, right? And that's not extreme. That's not the extreme position you could get. So don't be scared by the extreme position on it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Don't be scared. Trust your experience. You know, you've all these experience over the years. You know, trust that. Trust if you just got out of school. Trust that schooling you went through. You know, all that process. Um, you know, you're human, right? Be proud of the fact that you're a human, and you've got a lot more to offer than the AI has. So yeah, don't be scared. Don't worry about it. Adapt. Be ready to adapt.
If you want to know the bar, obviously there's no sort of hard bar, but if you just think about the training process and you kind of, if you believe like I do that the model can never be smarter than the data it was trained on. It can be faster, it can be cheaper, it can't be smarter. So just go and think about who the people are that are doing the training. It's not the best people in the world, right? It's the kind of modern equivalent of a body shop. Like it's people that just kind of go through the motions to do basic tasks. That's what they're kind of training on. If you're above that level, you're able to make better decisions. Doesn't mean you're safe, right? Because you could still get caught up in it regardless. But from a capability standpoint, you feel pretty good about that because you know that you can produce better work in that model. Just you just got to not find yourself trapped in the expectation that you're going to do it at the same quality and cost or the same latency and cost as the model because you won't be able to do that. But put yourself in the right
Yeah, that's
position.
a really good takeaway. In fact, if anything, that's the best thing you can take away from this is what you just said there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you'll see the fear proliferate for a while. Um, I think a lot of it stems from people doing layoffs, and they see all of the layoff activity, and it's being attributed to AI. Um, but the consensus amongst the investment class is that it's not at all, that this is just normal cyclical stuff. And people did weirdly enough, a lot of hiring during COVID as everything went offshore and they changed things over. They found themselves sort of, um, because the prices were rising during COVID, there was margin expansion. And every industry in this kind of cycle is when you're growing, you're focused on the top line. And when you're dropping, you're focused on margin. So if you're going through a period of expansion, your revenue is increasing, your margins expanding, and then you start to go on the other side of it, your revenue is coming down and you're trying to protect your margin. And the easiest way to protect margin is fire people. So what are they doing? Firing people. Now, what do you say when you do that? You say AI did it, right? You don't say this is a normal cyclical business thing and our business is weakening now and we want to have less people to keep our margins high because that sounds bad. But AI is automating it. That sounds good. So that's the prevailing narrative. But if you're ever when you read an article on CNN, you have no idea whether they're telling you the truth exactly why some of the same. But if you go and read the securities filings, if you sit in the investor call, they're brutally honest. They're like, look, AI didn't really contribute that much, but look at our margin. We got to protect our margin. Like they can't lie to it's against the law to lie to the investors. It's not against the law to say whatever you want to journalists. So, but it's boring. It's hard to search. You really got to put in the effort, and that's why most people don't. But that's closer to the reality than anything that you're going to see on TV or on YouTube.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Almost 40 minutes now of us rambling in
Gold,
our office.
gold
But
content.
yeah, we're not sure where we're going to post this, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever, but we'll post it somewhere. And if you have any comments, drop the comments in whatever forum that is going to be. And yeah, again, my name is Stu. This is Philip. We're with AIlogy.co. Check us out. And yeah, we'll hopefully do another one of these next week if you'll have us.
Yeah. Cheers, folks.
Thanks. Bye now.